I'm Dr. Alvin Thomas. My work and this show is dedicated to educating, validating, elevating, and celebrating the importance of Black fatherhood. This is the Black Fatherhood Podcast. That iconic barbershop scene from Coming to America features Eddie Murphy in an argument over who is the best boxer. When we think about the legacy of Black American boxers, names like Muhammad Ali, Sugar Ray Leonard, Floyd Patterson, Jersey Joe Walcott, and Joe Louis come to mind. But before all of them, there was Jack Johnson. Johnson made history by becoming boxing's first ever African American world heavyweight champion, stopping Tommy Burns in Australia. A sign of the times was that the police had to stop the recording of the fight to make sure no footage existed of a white man being knocked out by a black man. In 1910, as reigning heavyweight king, Jack Johnson, aka the Galveston Giant, knocked out America's great white hope, James J. Jeffries, in what was billed the fight of the century. That victory for Johnson led to race riots across America. In 1912, Johnson was arrested for transporting a white woman across state lines, and he wasn't officially pardoned until over a century, 106 years later, in 2018. The Royale is a play based on the life of Jack Johnson. It's been performed in theaters across the country and is currently on stage in Spring Green, Wisconsin. Today we're speaking with Jamal James, the actor who plays the title role. Jamal James is an actor, writer, improviser, and model, currently starring as the lead in the American Players Theatre production of The Royale as boxer Jay Jackson. Welcome to the show, Jamal.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So the play is a story about the glory and the doubt and the very real danger that comes with blazing trails as a black man in America. Like the sport at its center, its story is suffused with grace. The fighter himself is irresistible, brash, and confident, at least on the outside. He's a man at the very top of his craft, forced by society into the role of underdog. Tell us this story of the Royale.
It's a hard one because the Royale, specifically as a fictionalized retelling of Jack Johnson's story, it's all about the lead up to the fight that happened in 1910 and I would say, repercussions or ramifications of him going through with that fight in a way that I'm not sure that Jack Johnson really wanted to think about, but that the black community was having to deal with because, as you said, there were race riots around that time once he won, and black people did get killed once he won. And you also brought up that there was the stopped footage to make sure that people couldn't see that he won. It was all a big opportunity for people to just try to take things away from black people again, and that's hard. That's hard to go through. And the fact that so many people got killed just for saying, I would like to be the best, and I am the best. That's uh, if it's any if it hurts anyone's feelings, I think that's a white person's problem. Like, black people should not need to hold themselves back for white people's sensitivity, and that's usually what the play is touching on. But it's also touching on beauty and power, who is allowed to have it.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love about this story is that it's really just teaching and telling people that you're born with beauty and power, and that it can't be given to you and it can't be taken away. You just have it because you're born. Once you're born, you're amazing, and that's enough. You don't need to compare yourself to anybody. But it's a hard road to get to understand that lesson.
So I had the privilege of watching you on stage, and I was mesmerized. The whole cast, the production, the experience, the roller coaster of emotions, and what the cast and the theater was able to achieve with what I consider minimalist props. And just the energy that you were able to kind of create, even with the minimal number of props and stage material, just blown away. But what, at the core of it, what drew you to the title role of Jay Jackson?
I think for me, it's the opportunity to do that story here in this place, in a rural place like this, but also the fact that it's a person that I didn't know enough about. I didn't learn about that in school, which is another thing that I was like, oh, I wish our education system was giving more props or learning around these individuals who did change the makeup of the country. Because when he won, he did change the makeup of this country.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to portray that. And this is the second time that I've done this role. But in 2019, I had suffered a leg injury and I had to be doing a lot of physical therapy. I couldn't like work out, I couldn't bulk up. And so when I was doing the show, I was just trying to take care of my leg, just trying to take care of my knee. And I wasn't able to attack it as well as I was able to do here. So able to do it 5 years later and to do it with this theater, with the American Players Theater, with people that I respect and love was very much a blessing. So I was glad that I was able to bring that play here, and then Brenda was like, "Let's do it and see what happens." And they've been all supportive because I do think that this play is doing a lot of work in this area for the people that live here.
Agreed. I think most recently coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns and the racial reckoning that was happening immediately after the George Floyd murder,
Yes,
um,
yes,
these kinds of stories suddenly began to take on a whole new life of their own and a different kind of poignance and importance. And so I think of George Floyd and the litany of other names, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and I think to myself, how different is that? How different is our time period from that time period?
mm,
In that time period that the play takes place, participating in any kind of civil rights movement was not something that you entered into lightly.
hmm
Jay had to deal with the idea that if he competed in the match and won, that it would mean violence or death for a lot of people.
hmm
Tell us how you kind of juxtaposing those two time periods, today's time period and the civil rights marches and movements around today and for justice and whatnot, and the civil rights movement at that period when Jay was alive.
Well, this is when we get into like differences between what the play is and what Jack Johnson was. Like
Mm-hmm.
Jack Johnson, I feel was very much a precursor to O.J. Simpson.
Mm.
Like O.J. Simpson would take offense to someone saying, "Hey, are you're doing this for black people?" And he would be like, "No, I'm doing this for O.J." Jack
Mm.
Johnson was a man ahead of his time, and for lack of a better word, I'm not going to say that he was selfish, but I
Mm-hmm.
think his viewpoint was just like, I'm the best and I just want to work on myself, which is, can be an understandable feat. But like white men and white people didn't like that. They liked it for themselves. They didn't like it for black people to have that. But the play itself has Jay to consider that there are black lives being lost. And that is a thing that I think that he takes into heart that is spectacular in a way of like understanding that there's a risk and there's a risk here that I'm not sure that Jack Johnson really considered because he was just like, I just want to do what I want to do. Because you shouldn't be hindered because you're great at something.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And Jay doesn't want to be hindered because he's great at something. And then when he just wants to be the best and win because he deserves that. There's no one else can hold a candle to him, and he knows that. He just walks around with that kind of confidence, knowing that he's worked hard and that he's the best boxer around. So I think it's hard to say what's different between that time period and ours because people right now are just saying, I would like to be the best of what I am, and I would like that opportunity to be equal to everybody else. And that's just the way it should be. Um, I, I think we're still fighting the same fight. We're just fighting it in different ways. I mean, social media is everywhere. The internet is everywhere. Things can be recorded. While back then there was no video recording to show race riots, to show lynchings, to show killings. There was nothing like that. Um, so I feel like people at that time didn't have to have that footage shoved in their face to say this is ugly and you have to deal with this and you need to stop. While right now we're like, no, we're going to show this stuff to you and show this is ugly behavior and we don't want to stand for it. So it's the same fight. It's just used. We're just fighting it in different ways.
Yeah, I almost see Mamie Till as the interim between Jack Johnson's period of time
Absolutely.
and our period of time, where she says, no, you are going to see the ugly repercussions of racism. You are going to
Hmm.
see the ugly repercussions of discrimination. You are going to see my child's face and what
Yes.
you did to his body. I am not going to have a closed casket. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
that was the precursor to things like recordings that we saw of Ahmaud Arbery, recordings that we saw of George Floyd. It's
Hmm.
because of people who had gone before that who are now making it even more accessible now to us. So without trying, I mean, people know the story of Jack Johnson, and
Hmm.
it's not difficult to go back into history and kind of dig it up.
Hmm.
But I want to be careful also to not spoiler alert. I want to put out a spoiler alert. There's more than one moral debate going on in the story for Jay Jackson, and without giving away too much, could you talk a little bit about how his sister and his connection with his sister, the conflict with his sister,
Yeah.
how that leads into or feeds into his own moral dilemma
Hmm.
and decision around whether or not to actually go on with this fight.
But yes. Walking around, walking around.
I know,
It's
walking around that
interesting.
spoiler alert.
It's but that's what it is. It is interesting looking at like what are reasons for why we do what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think everyone is wrestling always like with like what do you want to do with your life, and what is the precursor to what elevated you to think about what you want to do with your life.
Mm.
And for Jay Jackson in the story, it's very much tied to his sister about why he boxes in the first place. And not to get into any spoiler places, but that's a very sensitive and I would say even a dark and beautiful place for why he decides to box in the first place. And I think everyone wrestles with like the reason why you want to like act or travel, or people who actually want to tell the weather, or who want to write, or who want to be in business. Like there are reasons for why we want to do what we do. And the story, I think, creates a compelling reason for why Jay Jackson wants to be the best in the first place, and not need to be beholden to anyone to have that moniker of being the best. It's just like the idea, like if you work at something, you should be recognized for it. That's it. In the way that he sees white people, white men during that time, his peers having that recognition, and just because they work hard at it, not needing to be extra. You know what I'm saying? Like not needing to have all these other things, but you're fighting against the time period. You're fighting against people looking at you differently and saying that you're ugly, or you're a monster, or you're not worthy of honor and respect.
You're butting against this other issue, the idea of John Henryism,
Mm, mm, mm.
that black people are expected to be successful. You have to do it better than anybody
Yes.
has ever done it before,
Yes.
and better than anybody else will ever do it,
Yes.
just to be at the basic level.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember hearing that quite a bit when I was in college. I remember hearing it a lot among my peers that it wasn't enough to just have a couple of publications. But as a black grad student, you had to go over and above and have multiple publications and have them in very good journals to even be accepted as being a good researcher.
Mm.
And it's I think it's a thing that a lot of black people in America are still adjusting to and still dealing with. And it's difficult to convince people that exists. Sometimes people make you believe that this is just you, and maybe that is true. In some cases, it is just us thinking to ourselves that this is what we need to do. And in other spaces, you walk in and people give you the message that no, you can't just be a regular person. You have to be the magical Negro.
Mm. Mm. I see that. I see that. I think that that's where you get into the place of where the signpost is always changing, you know?
Yep.
So you can meet that signpost, and then say someone will give you something else to elevate yourself to. And you're just like, I just wanted to be here in this place. I don't need to get through all these other signposts just to be recognized by you. Like, why do I have to do that? Why do I have to jump through hoops that you're not asking anyone else to jump through? And then when you jump through those hoops, you're like, yes, I got here. Someone's like, oh, you forgot this other one over here. And you're like, that's
Yep.
not, it's just the game just keeps going over and over and over. And I think that there's something to be said about what is right now, especially when you're talking about like history and what's taught, and what I think is going on a little bit with Florida, with like the whole critical race theory
Mhm.
and like erasure of like certain things and not teaching regular Black history as actual history. There's there's an erasure of what is truth, and I think that there's a real practical application of what willful ignorance is. Like, everyone's ignorant of something. I think we've weaponized that word ignorance. It's just like
Mhm.
ignorance just means you don't know something. Everyone doesn't know something. That's just a normal way of being. But willfully ignorant is like I'm going to ignore what the truth is because I would like to stay in what is truthful to me in my brain instead of what is actually reality.
Mhm.
And I think there's a lot of that going on right now in a way that is very detrimental to Black people, to the Black community in general at large. So there's a fight, definitely a fight going on about that.
Yeah, I like that you brought up the issue of erasure, and I'm going to add to that the rewriting. So there's the erasure that's happening, and then the rewriting
Hmm.
from which the erasure emerges. The spoken word in the play, though, speaking of the writing, is beautiful. But the physical rhythms, the fluidity, the dance, the movement, also plays a very pivotal role in the play. Talk to us a little bit about how movement is expressed in that play and how the different types of movement throughout helps tell the story.
Gosh, that's hard. Not hard. It's just it's such a different way of storytelling that it's difficult to even think about like why that is.
Right.
There's claps and musical rhythms for when you see the show, people who are listening, that elevate certain moments and story points. But we added another layer into the show that is done by Russell Holtz, who's also an actor here. If you're if you are a subscriber to American Players Theater, you would have seen him in The Brother Size. Right now, he's in Merry Wives. He's also doing Tybalt in Romeo and Juliet soon. But he added a lot of soundscaping, a lot of rhythmic things to elevate scenes. And there's claps that are written in the script, but what he did was like there was drum beats and all these kind of things throughout different
Mhm.
scenes. And I think that sort of allowed people to click into what is actually compelling in some of these boxing matches, and as well as when there's silence and when you're not listening to anything at all, so that you hear certain words or phrases that pop out to you that help, I think, solidify the story in different ways that you might not have seen at other places who choose to do this play. Because yes, the play is making the rounds around the country, and it has been for a couple of years. But it's the script, I think, that is really sticking with people. The playwright Marco Ramirez like wrote a beautiful, beautiful script that can work without pretty much any props at all. It's very bare bones, and you just have if you just had the claps and the boxing ballet that happens between some of the actors, including myself, I think the story would hit just as much as it does when you do add more props to it. But there are plenty of plays that don't work that way. I think the script itself is very powerful in its simplicity.
I will say that when I heard the claps and the stomps the very first time when it came, I was like, "What the heck is going on here?" Like, where's the sound? Like, I'm waiting for the sound tech to pipe in the clap, the punches and the action. I was like, "What's happening here?" And then you sit back and allow the play to unfold as it wishes, and you submit yourself to it, and suddenly the your your breath, your body, your ears wait for these claps and these stomps to cue you into something else that's about to happen or something that's happening. I remember there was a clap that was going on, and then there was also a heartbeat, something that was going on at the same time. I was like, oh, so the clapping here is not just what's going on stage, the action on the stage, but it's
Mm.
also the visceral experience that that the character is having, and I get to join this visceral experience. My heart starts beating. I was like, "What? what sorcery is this? This is ridiculous. Is that what people were going for? As what the director was going for?
Yes, our director Tyrone Phillips, who is an amazing Chicago-based director, he came in very much trying to like get the heartbeat like pumping for the audience, so that they can't sit back. He didn't
Hmm.
want anyone sitting back in any way, shape, or form. And working with that with Rochelle as well as myself and the rest of the cast, like trying to just make sure that you can't like rest on your laurels. It's not like where you like get a popcorn and movie, you can just sit back and like enjoy. He wants to be like fully invested, and make people like lean into those kind of things. So he was very, very big about trying to figure out what those heartbeat moments are. And the fact that it worked on you, I'm like, yes, that's exactly what we're trying to go for, you know?
Those of you who are listening to this podcast, if you have not seen this play, the Royale, please go see it. It will mesmerize you. It will change your life. I was on the edge of my seat, and I couldn't figure out why. It's like, why is this thing? Why is like this is not like watching the Blacklist on
Yes.
on Netflix. It's like, why is this grabbing me like this? And the roller coaster of emotions, like I could feel the catch in my throat. It's like, why am I feeling anything for this person? Like, it's obvious that it's a play, but you forget that it's a play, and you feel the catch, and you feel your eyes start welling up. And it's like, oh, I'm actually connecting to this human story. And I think at the end of the day, that is what the story of Jack Johnson is. It's not just a story about a black man. It's not just a story about a black boxer. It's a story about a human being, and a human being searching for the recognition of his humanity. Well, not even searching, because he wasn't asking for it. He was simply saying, I am just going to be human, and you can do what you want with that. I'm going to just be myself. I
Mm,
don't need
mm,
to exist within white gaze. I'm going to
right.
just be myself.
It's very
Yeah.
unapologetic. It's just a very unapologetic way of thinking about your life, which is the way that we should be. Um, and that's very much about Jack Johnson being ahead of his time. Like that's a hard time for between 1905 1910 to walk and act that way, when black people could just easily just be lynched for no reason at all. Um, but he was the best, and he got money, and he was able to have that like way of doing things. And I think the play acknowledges some of that, but the play, I think, is really trying to split some things when it comes to Jack Johnson himself, to what fictionalized is going on with Jay Jackson in the play, and it's really is about how that you just have beauty when you're born.
Mm,
And I think that idea is really hits people in a hard way, like that, like where people like forgot that you actually are beautiful. We forget that sometimes because of pain, because of other people telling us who we are, because there's so many fights right now politically as well. It's like we just forget, oh my gosh, I'm beautiful and you're beautiful, and no one can give that to you. You're just born. And like, oh gosh, that's different. And the fact that it's centered around this story about this black man fighting in this way, I think it's I don't know, I just think it's a very different story that people aren't really expecting when they come in, and they think, oh, there's boxing and there's a boxing bag. You're like, you don't think you're going to get that type of story, but you do.
exactly. So the play tracks the experiences of three generations of men: the coach, the boxer, and the protege. Tell us about those characters and how masculinity is expressed in each. How are they different? How are they the same?
Well, you were talking also about like in the presence of like how this deals with like fatherhood a little bit, and I think
Hmm.
these three characters would be different, very different fathers. Winton, who is the actual like the old the one who's the coach,
Hmm.
he's got his own version of sins and things, and he just wants to see that barrier being broken. But he knows that the only person who can make that choice is yourself. It's like no one can give that to you. So like for him, it's just like to elevate and say like you have the opportunity to do this, but you can't ask anyone else for permission. With Jay is just like I wish to win, and I'm gonna make sure that everyone understands that I'm the best, and I want to make sure that you understand that you're great, just being here in the world, and that no one can take that from you. And I think that's how he would be with his children. Like I would think that if he had a son or a daughter, that he would be like, lift up your head and keep your head lifted up no matter what, because you deserve to be here. And I think he also sees that kind of energy in Fitch, his protege, as Fitch is being very, very scrappy. He's being very, very tough. He's sometimes I think in a way like Jay sees him being like overtly tough in a way that's not always genuine, but he knows that it comes from a genuine place. It's like when you're young and you're scrappy, and you're just like, I need to be respected here. And he's like, it's okay, it's all right.
Right.
You're fine. Let's get you some more skills yet before you try to walk around like me, okay? Before you try to do that. I think Fish sees Jay as someone to uh, for a better word, idolize, but like emulate and try to like live up to and try to be better than. And there's a quote in the play that Winton, the coach, says at some point you're going to be better than Jay, and I think that is a truth that the play tries to elevate. That if Fish
Hmm.
was to keep going and keep boxing the way that Jay is doing, that he would be better. And I think that that's the lesson to the next generation. Is like we're trying to foster you so that you can be better than what we are, even within all of the fights that's going on, the fight for equality, the fight for equity as human beings, that we want our children to be better than what we've inherited in a way. So I think that's all in terms of like when we talk to our children. And when I do have kids, I hope that I have this in my heart at the same time, that I always want my children to think that they are great, and that they can be better than myself, and that the world does not define their worth. That's something that I think everyone is wrestling with right now, and very much for people of color, but anyone who's tried to deal with oppression. But I just think it's also a human thing, um, that we can allow the world to define how worthy we are as human beings when we shouldn't. That's not the world doesn't have that kind of shouldn't have that kind of power.
Agreed. Very much agreed. What do you think then is the role of the role that sports have played in the story of black men in America? Like, has anything changed since Jack Johnson's time?
Has anything changed? I mean, I'm not sure if that's the case. I think that when you're talking about black men's bodies being on display for like strength or speed or skill, it's not always done in a way that's genuine,
Hmm.
in a way that it's actually giving, I don't know, space to honor that body as an actual like thing and not something for you to get something from. You
Mm.
know what I'm saying? Not as a meal ticket, not as a money prop, but as something to honor and be like, oh, that's someone's body and that's someone's skill. Let's just applaud what that is and be grateful for it instead of like, oh, this is what I can have to get me more money as someone who is not black. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, I think that level of exploitationship is still in sports
Hmm.
today. I just think that people are trying to be as very vocal about it and fighting against it as possible. But I'm not sure that that idea has changed because money is money.
I like that.
Money is
Money is money. I mean, every so often I hear when sportsmen and women speak out as persons about a particular issue, the usual refrain is just shut up and play.
yes, and that's you can't do that because you. It's like saying like, well, just shut up and report the news, or just shut like everyone is like just shut up and go be a construction worker. Or just like you don't do that. That's not a thing. I think it's just because you're in an especially now, like sports is like such a national spotlight thing
Hmm.
that they just expect you to just play the sport and not have any opinion about anything when it is like you're living life. Everyone is just living life. You can't just not have an opinion about it just because you have a sport that people put money in or use to escape their life. Like you can't. That's not a good ask of people to do, and no one should do it. No sports person should do it.
Agreed. Agreed. Well, Jamal, I want to really thank you for taking on this role and playing it so well.
Thank you.
But I also want to highlight and pay homage to Jack Johnson and
Mhm.
the sacrifice and the feat that he took up even if it was just because he was trying to be as normal as possible, just going after the thing that he wanted, something so simple, and the effect that it had. When you think about Jack Johnson back in the 1900s and today, why do you think a story about a black boxer in the early 1900s still resonates so strongly today?
Honestly, I think it has something to do with the pioneer that he was. There is something compelling about an individual choosing to ignore society, to ignore the repercussions, ramifications, the constraints, the boxes, what have you, of society. We crave people who do that, who lead in this way. And the fact that this individual did it at such a time when people were dying around him and said, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to win and you're going to respect me, is compelling. And I think it's a lesson for people even now who really want to actually have that ability for themselves to step out and says, you know what, I'm going to have respect because I should have it just for being born in this age, just for being equitable, just to have equality. Um, and I, there's something courageous about that. Uh, we are searching for courage. And I think people who watch this play are just emboldened at the end of this play, emboldened through the process of watching this individual go through these things, and then wanting to find out more history about the actual boxer Jack Johnson, and finding out, oh my gosh, he was very much a three-dimensional person who had demons as well as like blessings, and like how he just walked through the world just courageous as possible. People feel connected to that and want to have that for themselves
Mm-hmm.
and start looking at it like, how can I be courageous in my own life? And I've even felt that with myself. I get inspired by the play as well as by Jack Johnson himself, of just being able to walk through the world, knowing that my feet are secure and that I can boldly walk with my head held high and with a I don't know, a grounded voice or something. Like it's just like you feel very you want to feel centered by the end of the play for me, and I think that's what people are connecting to, and in a different way than other plays sometimes.
Thank you so much, Jamal. It was a pleasure having you on the podcast and hearing your thoughts, hearing your ideas. I hope as many people as possible go off to see this play, The Royale.
Oh,
Stellar
please, yes, bring all
performance.
your friends.
Make an afternoon of it. It really is worth it. It is really worth it. Thank you very much again, Jamal.
Thank you.
Truly, we are all searching for courage, and the fight continues from the 1900s even till today and even before. Just that we're fighting with very different armaments, different methods, different challenges, but ultimately the core of the fight is the same: the desire to just be, the desire to just live out your humanity unapologetically, the desire to exist and to be similar or different, but to still exist without permission or without the need for permission, without judgment, outside of the gaze of either white gaze or educational gaze or class gaze, whatever the type of gaze that people sometimes find themselves beholden to exist outside of that. You don't need permission from anyone to live, to be free, to be the best that you are. You are here, and that's all the permission you will ever need. Thank you again, Jamal, for reminding us of the story and also of the struggle, but also suggesting to us that we can continue to move and in our search for courage, to find courage outside of ourselves, but to also be kind to ourselves and find that courage sometimes within our own selves to live, to be, and to do so unapologetically. You've been listening to the Black Fatherhood Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Alvin Thomas. I'm a clinical psychologist, researcher, and the director of the Tri-Lab at the University of Wisconsin-Madison's School of Human Ecology. Original music for our series was composed and performed by Micaiah De Silva. Our series producer is Jill Ruby. The podcast is supported by the School of Human Ecology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And you can follow me on Twitter at Dr_AT758. That's Dr_AT758. And on the web at thomaslab.humanecology.wisc.edu. Make sure to subscribe to the Black Fatherhood Podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts.